I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. A class action lawsuit has been filed by the migrants who were kidnapped and trafficked by Ron DeSantis from Texas to Martha's Vineyard. This class action was filed against Ron DeSantis, against Jared Perdue, the Secretary of Florida Department of Transportation in his official capacity, the state of Florida, and the Florida Department of Transportation. The stories here of the migrants who were kidnapped and lured with things like gift certificates to McDonald's and fake and phony and fraudulent brochures telling them that there was going to be jobs and benefits awaiting them when they arrived, and there was not whatsoever. The torment and the torture that these individuals who were kidnapped and trafficked by Ron DeSantis is spelled out in tragic and gruesome detail in this bombshell class action complaint. Alonza Americas and Yanet Doe and Pablo Doe and Jesus Doe, on behalf of themselves and others similarly situated, in other words, a class action against Ron DeSantis and the other defendants that I just mentioned. I want to go through this class action lawsuit with you, and it's for a violation of their civil rights under the United States Constitution, because each of these individuals who were here in the United States after crossing the border, as the complaint points out, they immediately surrendered themselves to federal immigration officials, and each has at all times relating into this complaint active federal proceedings to adjudicate their immigration status. They all fled from the repressive authoritarian Maduro regime in Venezuela. By the way, it's probably worth mentioning here, although not directly related to this case, that Donald Trump's lawyer, Christopher Kise, who's now representing him on the search warrant matter that we've talked about, was a registered foreign agent of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. But I digress. This complaint explains plaintiffs have led lives inflicted by violence, instability, insecurity, and abuse of trust by corrupt government officials that most Americans could hardly conceive. They fled to the United States in a desperate attempt to protect themselves and their families from gangs, police, and state-sponsored violence and the oppression of political dissent. To put it simply, plaintiffs and the class action group similarly situated people seek to represent are vulnerable in a way and to an extent that almost defies verbal description. Then the complaint goes on to say, in or around September 2022, defendants, Ron DeSantis and others, and their unidentified accomplices designed and executed a premeditated, fraudulent, and illegal scheme centered on exploiting this vulnerability for the sole purpose of advancing their own personal, financial, and political interests. This scheme involved the unidentified Doe defendants acting in concert with the named defendants, identifying and targeting class members by trolling streets outside of a migrant shelter in Texas and other similar locations, pretending to be good Samaritans and offering humanitarian assistance. And it goes on to say, to gain plaintiffs' trust and to induce unwitting cooperation with defendant's scheme, the Doe defendants provided items such as a $10 McDonald's gift certificate to class members suffering from chronic food insecurity. After luring plaintiffs by exploiting their most basic needs, the Doe defendants then made false promises and false representations that if plaintiff and class members were willing to board airplanes to other states, they would receive employment, housing, educational opportunities, and other like assistance upon their arrival. Next, the defendants put class members up for free in hotels, sequestered away from the migrant center, and from the possibility of actual Good Samaritans finding out how these class members were being abused and were going to be abused. Then it says, on information and belief, defendants procured and paid $650,000 for private charter planes, about $12,300 per passengers, and transported these individuals to Martha's Vineyard in the evening with no food, water, or shelter. No one at Martha's Vineyards knew that they were coming at all. And it says these immigrants who are pursuing proper channels for the lawful immigration status in the United States experienced cruelty akin to what they fled in their home country. Defendants manipulated them, stripped them of their dignity, deprived them of their liberty, bodily autonomy, due process, and equal protection under the law, and impermissibly interfered with the federal government's exclusive control over immigration in furtherance of an unlawful goal and personal political agenda of DeSantis. And then it goes on to say how DeSantis bragged about it in a press conference of Fox News. And again, this all arises from the kidnapping scheme by Ron DeSantis, where he literally kidnapped these migrants who were here as asylum seekers, boarded them on planes on September 14th, handed them fake pamphlets. And the fake pamphlet aspect of this is in paragraph 38 to paragraph 40 of the complaint, which says the defendants manufactured and made a false brochure that included such things as statements that, quote, during the first 90 days after a refugee's arrival in Massachusetts, resettlement agencies will provide basic needs support, including assistance with housing, furnishing, food, and other basic necessities, clothing and transportation, to job interviews and job training, assistance in applying for Social Security cards, registering children for school. And the brochure had a separate section, this whole thing was fraudulent, entitled Refugee Cash Assistant, which stated it provides up to 8 months of cash assistance. I mean, this is horrific levels of criminality, which is being investigated by the Bexar County Sheriff in Texas, which is the San Antonio region. I think criminal charges are likely to come out of Bexar County and the sheriff's investigation there. This is a civil lawsuit for the deprivation of human rights and civil rights of these migrant workers. And the stories here of each of these migrant workers is just so tragic, and it tells the story of these various plaintiffs who arrived with nowhere to go and were traumatized again, and they suffered beyond anyone's imagination. They didn't know where they were lost, they had no food, and all of the promises that were made to them. I mean, how sick and disturbing can these MAGA Republicans be? Were just false and not true, and they lied to these people and got their hopes up so that they could kidnap them, smuggle them, and traffic them so they could try to make some political point. That's who MAGA Republicans are. I'm glad that there is this powerful class action that has been filed. I think that this class action is going to prevail. It definitely has all of the elements on the merits. Ron DeSantis is likely going to have to be deposed. All these people are going to be deposed. The private jet company is likely going to be sued. They're probably one of the Doe defendants. All of the people who helped the scheme are going to be sued. And I'm glad that this class action has been filed to hold these bad actors, these evil actors, accountable for their heinous acts. We'll keep you updated on the status of this class action lawsuit as it develops. Make sure you subscribe right now. Hit the subscribe button. We are on our way to 1 million subs, thanks to you. If you haven't subscribed to the MeidasTouch Network, what are you doing? Hit the subscribe button right now. And if you want to help independent media grow, go to patreon.com/MeidasTouch. That's Patreon, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. And you could support independent media. We don't have outside investors. We're fueled by democracy and supported by you. I'm Ben Meiselas. Until next time.
This November is Rowvember. MeidasTouch just released its brand new collection of Rowvember t-shirts and pins to let the country know what's at stake this upcoming midterm election. Go to store.MeidasTouch.com to grab yours. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.